Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I saw a post, I think it was yesterday, somebody had posted, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." And I told him that that's not something we talk about here. You know, and he goes, "Well, I love snow." And it's like, yeah, we all love snow. We just don't talk about it. You know, because it's going to come and it could be bad. And since talking to him, my thumbs have hurt like crazy this morning, like there's snow coming this afternoon. So, but anyway, you got to watch those Californians wanting snow. But it's good having you here. We are continuing our study in Ecclesiastes. Today we'll be looking at the 4th chapter, dealing with power and with wealth. Everybody wants a view from the top. I don't know if you've ever been to a city. We went to Seattle a few years ago. I think it was for our anniversary, and did some research to see some things, what to look at and all. And they have I don't remember the name of the tower or how tall it was, but we went to like 77 floors up or something, and you get to look out over Seattle. And, it's a different view than when you're down on the ground level looking up. There you look down on it and see a lot. It was really interesting. We went to New York one time, and we went to the Empire State Building. And you get up to the top, and again, you're looking down at the whole city. But most of it, when you look down, was yellow cabs. On the streets. That's all it was just yellow cabs. But you expect something when you go up there. We went to see the Grand Canyon one time, and I'm embarrassed to say I got mad because it was overcast at the North Rim. And I kind of got mad because one of my bucket list things was to see the Grand Canyon. We were at the North Rim, and I couldn't really get any good pictures or see anything because it was raining and cloudy, and I got mad. But we expect sometimes when we go to see things, to see this beautiful city or, scenery or whatever. But when we expect things too when we climb that corporate ladder. We expect that once we get up from the basement or the ground level where all the work's being done, and we climb those stairs up to a management position, we expect it to be all roses and happy and everything else, but you find out that there's more stress up here than there was down here on the floor, because up here you're still getting yelled out to, for production and saving money and pushing the people and everything else. So, the view up here that you thought was going to be nice sometimes isn't. And that's what we're going to look at today in Ecclesiastes. Just real quick, a recap. We looked at the universal events of how the sun comes up and sets and rises and sets. And, again, the writer is not specifically stated. It's just listed as a teacher. But everybody, and as we have seen so far in the first 3 chapters, it kind of leans to being Solomon, and I believe it's Solomon. So I'm going to say it's Solomon, even though the scriptures do not say who the writer is. But Solomon talks about that, that's vanity. All is vanity. He talked about the sensual pleasures, our 5 senses, and we try to get pleasure from all of this, and we do, but it doesn't last long. It fades away the next day or an hour later. So again, it was all vanity. Then he talked about wisdom and foolish. Didn't matter who you were, you still died. It didn't matter. It was all vanity. Then we talked about work and how a person can work his fingers to the bone, work 80 hours a week, to buy all this stuff, which we're going to talk about today. But he dies and he gives it to, somebody in his family who, like in Solomon's case, his son, wasted everything within a year, And so Solomon says, working your fingers to the bone 80, 90 hours a week, for what? It's all vanity. And then last week we looked at time and how there's a season for everything and a purpose for everything under heaven, but then it's still vanity because it all goes away. Today we're in chapter 4, with the first part we're going to look at oppression. The uselessness of selfish toil. Verse 1, chapter 4. Then I returned and considered all the oppression that is done under the sun. And we're going to see that term under the sun several times in this chapter. And what that refers to is earth, because we're under the sun. So he looked at earth and all the oppression that was going on. And look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressors there is power, but they have no comforter. Solomon, at the top of his reign, saw oppression all around him. The oppressed had no comforter. Today, those who are oppressed have agencies they can go to help with housing and medical, utilities and food. Back in the 60s, women felt that they were oppressed because they couldn't vote. They couldn't get jobs hardly. Their husbands wanted them to stay at home and to clean and to cook dinner and to get pregnant, and that was their life. And they started banding together and, ended up getting the votes they needed, and they were allowed to vote finally, and they could get jobs. And so that was something that they did because they felt that they were oppressed, even though they had to go through riots and fighting with their husbands and everything else. But they finally got what they wanted. They did not feel oppressed. The oppressed back in Solomon's time didn't have that right, nor did they have anybody on their side to help them. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela took to the streets with peaceful marches to protest for the rights of blacks to have the same rights and treatments as whites because they were oppressed. Now these two groups have rights and the power to enforce those rights. Solomon is stating that the oppressed during his time had no comforters. They had no rights. Solomon states that the oppressors, those in power, those at the top making the rules, that they had no comforters as well. It doesn't matter if you are at the top or you are at the bottom of the corporate ladder. Nobody, it doesn't matter your social status, nobody has anyone to comfort them. Verse 2, therefore I praise the dead who were already dead more than the living who are still alive. Corporations are demanding that their employees do more and more for less. The managers are being pressed from their bosses to accomplish more and more production, more revenue, for less time and less money. Why? Because they are being pressured from their bosses to do the same. The rock always rolls downhill. Those of us who are old enough can look back 10, 20, 30, 40 years and see how work life in buildings and offices, whatever, has changed. How before, kind of laid back, you did your job, you produced something good, that was a good product, and you were praised for it. Maybe even got a raise or got a bonus or whatever. But nowadays, it's push, 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 push. I've heard stories, at some of the centers around town that they really push for time. You've got to get this done. You've got these quotas that you've got to meet. You've got to get all this done within an hour. If you don't, you get your pay docked, or whatever. It's push, push, push. Totally different than what it was years ago. My father told me when he was in his 70s that he had retired at 55. And I looked at him and said, Dad, I'll be lucky if I ever get to retire because things have changed. Before you stayed with a company 20, 30, 40 years and you got a retirement. Nowadays, companies don't have retirements. It's up to you to do a 401k or invest or whatever, to have a retirement. Companies would rather hire 20 people at part-time, not working more than 32 hours, so they don't have to pay them any kind of bonuses or anything. They'd rather hire 20 people at part-time than 10 people at full-time because it costs them more. So what does that do to the employee? Well, that means they've got to have two jobs, to make enough money and struggle still to get by because it's, minimum wage or whatever. Again, that's the corporations pushing for more but spending less money to do that. What does that do? It is great for companies to do that, but it is harder for the people. Verse 3, yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun or on the earth. Better yet to have been born, to never have been born, than to face all the evil work that is being done on this earth just to make that dollar. To get that moment of pleasure from working your fingers to the bone all week for a day or two of pleasure during the weekend that is still a vapor, a mist. That will all vanish away come 7 a.m. Monday morning when you've got to go back to work. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Again, Solomon is telling us nothing but doom and gloom. But on the same token, he is telling us the truth. He is writing about this over 3,000 years ago, but it is still true today. Problem is, we still get so caught up in our daily march through life that we have blinders on and we don't see what is going on around us. We don't see the truth, or we don't want to admit that what Solomon is teaching here in Ecclesiastes is true. A life explained. So far we looked at oppression. Now let's go on and look at envy in verses 4 through 6. Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Today we call this point as keeping up with the Joneses. Your neighbor sees your fancy house, your jacked up truck, your motorhome, your pontoon boat with jet skis and ATVs sitting in your backyard. You have all these things because you both work hard so that you can play hard. You are a skillful worker. Solomon tells us that this too is vanity. Your neighbor, or you, if you are looking at your neighbors, standing in your second-story window, peering down at your neighbor's backyard, you are both grasping at the wind. There is nothing to be gained. Why? Your neighbor will go out and go into greater debt to get a newer car or a bigger boat or an ATV or whatever, maybe even a bigger house. And he moves into this new house and he gets in his window and he looks down at his neighbor, and for what? They've got bigger things, better things, a bigger motorhome, you know? And that's what Solomon is saying. It's all vanity. Why do we do it? Why do we have to keep up with the Joneses? It doesn't matter in the end. You can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. All is vanity. It's grasping for the wind. Verse 5, the fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. We looked at the worker. Now let's look at the lazy man, or in the King James Version puts it, the fool. What does the man do? He sits around and wrings his hand and does nothing. He consumes his own flesh. He is constantly sitting on a street corner with the signs begging for free money. What does Solomon have to say about this? Look in verse 6. Better a handful with quietness than both hands full together with toil and again grasping for the wind. Remember, we just read the verses where Solomon states that it is better to have been dead than to have to face the world today, or better yet, to never have been born. Here, Solomon states that it is better to have empty hands full of quietness than to have both hands full of toil and work and misery and grasping for that wind. We need to be satisfied with what we have, say one handful, instead of being miserable trying to fill both hands. James talks about this over in the New Testament in James 4, verses 1 through 3. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your member? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you not think that the Scripture says in vain, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously? But He gives more grace. Therefore He says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. We are living in this world, but we are just passing through. We are not trying to make this place under the sun our permanent home, our permanent dwelling. We should be putting up our treasures in heaven, like Matthew 5 stated, we read last week. We're not here on earth where moth and rust destroy it. Everything that we're working for is going to be gone away. Like I said, we can't take it with us. We need to be searching and looking to go to heaven. That's where we need to be focused on, not here on earth. Mike Mazzalongo lists 3 things that we should be doing in order to be satisfied where we are today in our lives. The first thing was to keep your eyes on your own stuff. Keep your eyes on your own stuff. Exodus 20, verse 17, part of the 10 Commandments says, thou shalt not covet, which is envy. We should not be envy of our neighbor's new boat or our neighbor's new house or our neighbor's whatever. We need to be looking at what we have, looking at our own stuff. This will stop you from wanting everything your neighbor has. I know it's hard because you see new trucks all around you. You know, the bigger, flashier new trucks come out. Oh, look at that. Look at all these neat little gadgets, you know. Or we go by the RV place down here on Highway 2, and we see all the new motorhomes and the trailers and the toy haulers and, you know, truck campers and whatever. Oh, man, mine is so rusty. Man, I need to get something better, you know. Don't worry about everything else. Look at your own stuff. The second thing Mike says is to give thanks for what you already have. Yes, we need to give thanks for our house and our clothes and our family and whatever. But Mike goes on and says, think about the small things. Thank God for having 2 eyes and 2 hands and 2 legs. You know, there were hundreds of soldiers that came back from our last war who don't have 2 legs or 2 arms or 2 eyes. You know, we need to thank God that we have those. We need to thank God that we woke up today. Give thanks for what you already have. And the third thing Mike says was to ask for what you need instead of complaining about what you don't have. There's a difference between the two of needing and wanting. I think sometimes we get them confused or maybe roll them up into the same ball. You know, we need this or we want that. I read this week on one of the little news blurbs, I didn't read the whole story, where a couple won the Powerball, $75 million. They went out and immediately bought a brand new yacht. And they had a picture of it. It was like a 4-layer yacht, 5 layers, stories, whatever. But they put all their money into that. Now they don't have the money to get the diesel, to be able to take it out or get a captain. And so here they spent their whole money on this boat, and it sits at the dock, not moving. But that's what they needed. No, that's what they wanted. You know, we got to separate our wants from our needs. And we can't complain about what we don't have. The next thing that we look at here with Solomon is disillusionment. I always have problems saying that. Verses 4 and 7. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone without companion. He has neither son nor brother. Yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. Now we have a man who is working his fingers to the bone. But for what purpose? He doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a brother. He only has himself. But yet he continues to work and do more work. To what end? He has nobody to give his wealth to. And we've already talked about that. He might be able to enjoy his wealth, but we have seen this which only brings short-term pleasure. He has to continue on and doing bigger and better things to find any pleasure. And then once that's over, he's bored again, so he's got to do something bigger and better to overcome the high that he got from his last thing. Maybe it was, mountain climbing. Well, okay, I did that. Now I need to go skydiving. I need to find something else. I need to sail around the world. Where does it stop? It doesn't. It's all vanity. So how do we as Christians take this information that Solomon has given us and make it through our daily grind to just pay our bills, to barely keep our heads out of the water? First, we aim for contentment. We aim for contentment where we are. We do that by looking at ourselves, not everybody else. We look at what we have and be content with what we have. Not, I got to do bigger. I got to do better. I've got to do like the Joneses. Strive to be useful. We've talked about this in our Wednesday night class about helping each other, being there for each other, building each other up, finding things that you can do. Okay? Be useful. And then work at being faithful. Some people might argue and say, well, I am faithful. I don't have to work on it. Yeah, you do. You've got to work continually on being faithful. Verses 9 and 10, the value of a friend. In the last few verses, Solomon is talking about how lonely it is when you are all alone. In these verses, he deals with that idea of loneliness and depression. Kathy and I watch a series on the History Channel called Alone. And it's where 10 contestants take 10 items off this list of 40. They can take 10 items with them, and these 10 contestants are put out into the wilderness somewhere, totally separated from anybody else. And whoever stays out there the longest will get $500,000. We watched the ending episode of Alone Frozen last night, to where they had to stay out there 50 days. The longest anybody has lasted is 100 days. So there's different things. They've been Vancouver Island. They've been down to Patagonia in Argentina. They went to Mongolia for a couple of years. They went up to the Arctic Circle, or just below the Arctic Circle. And the last episode or season was on the eastern coast in Labrador, Canada. But that's all they have are these 10 items. Here you are by yourself. Survive. And so they've got to build their shelter, they've got to find their own food, they've got to do everything by themselves with what they have. And some of them, like I said, have lasted 100 days. Others, I think the shortest was a couple of days. One guy only lasted 6 hours because of the bears. But in season 5, out of the 10 contestants, 4 of them left the show, gave up their chance for $500,000, and the reason was they missed their family. They missed their children. They missed their dog, But the fact of being alone was greater than the $500,000 that they could win. So being alone, being by yourself, a lot of it, dealing with the voices in your head or whatever, is worth going home to instead of staying out there in the cold and surviving. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Solomon is just not talking about physically tripping and falling. He's referring to falling down mentally as well. It is harder to get back up when you are alone or you feel alone and you sink down into depression. But it is a whole lot easier to get up, brush yourself off, and keep going on when you have somebody there to help you, somebody who you can depend on to help you in those times. We have all seen the commercial, the elderly lady who has fallen down and she's screaming, "Help, I can't get up." Well, if you have this pendant on with the button, you can push it and you will get help. Brothers and sisters, we need to be that pendant for each other. We need to be there for our brothers and sisters when they need help, regardless of what it is. We need to help each other. Verses 11 and 12. Again, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a three-fold cord is not quickly broken. It is easier to win a fight if it's two against one. The person alone will call it uneven, a fight, or not fair. But when you are facing the devil, wouldn't it be better to have somebody else on your side to help you, to fight the devil off, to resist the devil? So yes, two against one is a whole lot better. When I was looking up this about the three-fold cord, it kept sending me to wedding sites. And I guess it was a thing, or still is a thing, I don't know, to where they, up on the podium or whatever, there's three cords. One represents the husband, one represents the wife, and usually a gold-colored cord that represents God. And part of their ceremony, they weave that together to show a threefold cord being them and God. They'll be able to withstand anything. Okay? And it's true. I don't know how familiar you are with making a cord. Usually it's made out of hemp because hemp is one of the strongest fibers. And you take the plain fibers here, like you see in A, and they're just twisted together. And then once you twist three of them together, you twist this, like say clockwise, or what they call a left hand or right hand twist. And then you take three of those and you twist it together to form a larger rope. Then you take three of those and you twist them in a reverse order. So if this is a right hand twist, then this would be a left hand twist. And then you take three of these and you twist them together and you end up with a larger cord. Then you could take three of these if you wanted to make a longer cord, or a bigger cord, which is even going to be stronger. This is how they make rope today, 3,000 years later, after Solomon said a threefold cord is not quickly broken. He knew what he was talking about. And it still is used today in making these type of ropes. And again, twisting them in the opposite directions, again, they found out, makes it stronger than being twisted all in the same direction. Verses 13 and 14. Popularity passes away. Now, these last 4 verses of chapter 4 are totally different than the first 12 that we just read. In fact, when I watched Mike Mazzalongo's, he had 2 videos on this chapter, but when he got to the end of this, he totally skipped these 4 verses. I don't know why. And it might be because there's so much discussion among scholars as to what they mean. But we'll go ahead and give it a try. Verse 13. Better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. Better to be poor and wise than old and foolish. I think we all have seen examples of both the young being wise and the old being foolish. Verse 14. For he comes out of prison to be king, although he was born poor in his kingdom. Now, different commentaries have different ideas or situations on this verse, but a lot of them think that this is referring to Joseph. And we know, we've studied Joseph, but he's talking about how, remember, he came out of prison. Remember, his brothers were mad at him and threw him into a well to die. But then they ended up selling him into slavery. And then he went on and got good favor with the king, became second in command during the famine. And remember, his brothers came and bowed down to him because he was the ruler. And so a lot of people think that this is referring to Joseph. Going on in the last 2 verses, 15 and 16, we saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Again, some of the commentaries carry over the idea of Joseph into these verses here. Because as we said, the second youth, if we look back at Joseph's family, he was the second to the youngest. Okay, the second youth. There was no end of the people with whom he made king, and yet they come afterward and rejoice. Remember, like we just said, that Joseph was placed over everything, second to the king, okay, because of his knowledge, and he ruled, and everybody bowed down to him. And remember, there was a dream of where his brothers would bow down to him, and that's the reason they got mad at him. And well, that's what they did in the end, was they bowed down to him. So again, they reference these last 4 verses as possibly Solomon talking about Joseph. Solomon also talked about envy. Now let me back up a bit here. Solomon has taken us down a different path this week, talking about being oppressed in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter which side you are on, the oppressed or the oppressor, it is all vanity. We are all oppressed in one way or another, either by color, by sex, by religion, by status, finances, who we know, what type of year or type of car you drive, the color of your hair, if you are married or not, how old you are. We are all oppressed in some way. But boil it all down, none of it matters in the end. It is all vanity, a vapor. Then Solomon talks about being disillusioned into thinking that climbing the corporate ladder will make a difference, that we will become a better person and have more stuff and have a better family life. Solomon tells us what is important: friends. We need Christian friends in our life that can help us to survive this life. Without friends, we are like a single piece of rope. It won't hold up to too much pressure, but a 3-strand cord will hold up against almost anything. And it is time for my weekly spoiler alert. I don't want to leave you with all doom and gloom like Solomon has been teaching. I want you to think about everything that you do, and that I don't want you to think that it's all in vain, that it's worthless, because it isn't. You do what Solomon states at the end of this book. If we go all the way down to Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, the 13th verse. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter, of everything that he's going to discuss, that we're going to look at. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. To fear God and to keep his commandments gives our life meaning. It gives us true life. It gives us something to live for and something to share with others. Our life here on earth, under the big red ball, the things that we do are a vapor, but our afterlife, what happens when Jesus comes again, now that is life. That will be our true existence, spending eternity with God forever. That is what we should be striving for every single day of our life. Every vain thing we do in our daily life is a vapor, a smoke in the wind. It is what we must deal with to get to the finish line. Notice those last 5 words. For this is man's all. This is what we need to worry about, to fear God and to keep his commandments. Remember this statement tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, next week, next month, as long as we are taking in a breath, to fear God and to keep his commandments. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, please let us know. Let us be there for you. If you want to put on Christ today, we are here to take care of that sin problem. Or maybe you just need the prayers from your brothers and sisters to help you with struggles that you are facing. We could do that for you as well. Please let us know as together we stand and sing.